You are listening to the Music Mondays with MAZEMENT podcast. You can find this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. For more information, go to musicmondayspodcast.com. In this episode, we are going to get into a fact, the latest news, and I'm also going to introduce a new segment called Let's Get Technical. Following that, we have an all-new artist on call with Haelphon. And to close it out, we have a release feast. Here it is. What's up, music heads? This is another episode of the Music Mondays with MAZEMENT podcast. I am your host,
MAZEMENT.
Let's get right into it. Here's a fact.
Music Mondays, music facts.
Rapper Mac Miller's real name was Malcolm James McCormick, and he was from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Music Mondays, music facts.
Now, I know that was kind of like a double fact, like it was two facts in one, but like I felt like it was a sweetener just to add where he was from as well. Hip hop fans, I'm sure you heard about the Drake and Kanye beef that's going on right now, or maybe it's died down a little bit. I haven't paid any attention to it because obviously all it is just a publicity stunt to sell records. I mean, it's something I've repeated on this podcast in the past. I mean, I'm kind of done even thinking about Donda, the album. It's been released everywhere. It was delayed and all that. I don't really have to talk about it. If you're a hip hop fan, you've heard about it. You've heard about the events that went on for it. It is what it is. In other news, the baby that was on the album cover of Nevermind by Nirvana is now suing the band. I think it's like 15 people total for child pornography. Spencer Eldon was the baby. He's now 30. He claims that he's been through the ringer with his emotions throughout the years. I don't know. I mean, word for word, I forget exactly what it said, but basically he's now suing. I think it's $150,000 each person out of 15 people he's suing. It's kind of a delicate subject, so I don't want to comment on it too much, but I felt like I wanted to let you know about it because I thought it was interesting. EDM producer Grizz started his own cannabis line. I'm not surprised with how legal it's becoming around the United States that more and more, big music heads and stuff like that are going to get involved. I mean, some have already come out publicly and supported everything. It's pretty cool to see this transition. I'm not against it, but for more info, look up Astro Hippie and Telescope or Grizz, Griz. In a recent article with Billboard, I think it was that I read, he was talking about how he sold weed in high school and how he has experience with it then and like how the transformation is now to now being able to legally sell it. Kind of crazy to think about that. Different worlds, but now it seems to be used in the way that it should be used. Now, I know if you listen to this podcast, you've heard me mention Kendrick Lamar a million times as like my favorite rapper out right now. He is working on a new album and I felt like it is newsworthy. Supposedly it's his last Top Dog Entertainment album, which is the label he's under right now, which that's interesting. I don't know if that's just a publicity stunt, him saying that, or if he's trying to pressure the label to get a better deal. I don't know. I don't think he has a bad deal. I just don't know enough about it. But I guess after taking some time after Damn, he's now, put his phone down, enjoys life much more within the past few years, takes in what he can. And by doing so within the past few years, he's been able to write and focus on himself and probably his friends and family a lot more. Pretty admirable. But he's actually working on the production of the new album now, based on what I read. So stay tuned on that. So like I said in the intro to this podcast, I have a new segment coming your way. I often have engineers or, music heads on here, artists that have worked in the studio and know what certain equipment is and all that. And I mean, that's what I do, so I was like, why don't I incorporate some sort of gear element, or a software element where we talk about the latest. You know, when I talk about latest music news, I'm mainly doing that in the mainstream media, but just different stories that stuck out to me. Now, getting into gear and the latest technology, I'm now coming out with this new segment called Let's Get Technical. So here it is for the first time. What it will consist of is one piece of gear or one piece of news regarding gear or music technology that I want to include on an episode or I want to share with you that I thought was really cool or that I support. It's totally unbiased. I'm not sponsored by any of these products. But in this one today, I'm probably going to give you a little bonus as well. It's usually going to be one, but there was a few that stuck out to me. So I might mention those, let you know about them. But here it is. Let's get technical. Company called 512 Audio was founded by some of the creators of Warm Audio's microphones, amplifiers, guitar pedals. That team has started this new company out of Austin called 512 Audio, and they now have 2 new mics out called Limelight and Skylight. I checked them out. They look sick. If you're looking for a new mic, it's an XLR. I believe they're both XLR mics. Go check them out. And just because this is the first Let's Get Technical segment, I do want to mention 2 others before they get to be old news next month. But Oskitone, it's Oskitone, released a synthesizer that's customizable called Scout. And you actually like put it together. You create the sounds that you want it to play. You put it together and then play it. Like, I thought that was dope. I think it's like $200 or something. I don't remember the exact price, but it's not that bad for what it is. And the last piece that stuck out to me was Audio-Technica's usual M50s. You know, these headphones, you see them in most studios nowadays. Their new Bluetooth ones, the M50X BT2, offer EQ capabilities through an app. And it also has built-in Alexa. Like, I would never imagine being in a freaking vocal booth and being like, hey, Alexa, like this or whatever. Like, I've never used Audio-Technicas for anything other than studio monitoring, but I thought that was awesome. I'm going to check them out. I recommend the same, but I think they're like $350. So yeah, that's pretty much the new segment. Like I said, it's usually only going to consist of one item each month. But if you heard me recently on the Chill Cactus podcast, you would have heard me announce the debut release of my new duo, Real East Duo's single called Something New, coming on September 28th. It'll be released digitally to all major streaming platforms. So check it out on September 28th. You can pre-save it on Spotify on September 14th. So closer to that time, look on my socials. I'll post a link there so you can check it out. But in that episode, I also shared that we're going to release a live set soon. So we did a remix a few years ago it was for the Muramasa's song called Lovesick featuring A$AP Rocky. We remixed it and we are releasing the remix this Friday, September 3rd. I think I'm just going to throw it on SoundCloud for now, but there is a live set video as well that will be available on our YouTube channel. I'll share that on my socials as well. Follow us at Real East Duo. You'll be able to check it out as well. But yeah, I'm pumped for you to hear the single on September 28th as well, produced by Daniel Cruz. And I plan on throwing in a little bonus episode in the month of September for that as well. Now, we're going to get into an artist on call, and then we're going to close it out with a release feast after the artist on call. This artist on call today is Haelphon. He's an artist originally from Boston, is now in New York. Super talented singer-songwriter, can play guitar, can play piano. I was blown away because when I first checked out his music to bring him on this podcast, I was listening to some old releases that he did, and that sold me, just there. And now he has released his new EP, which we're going to talk about, but that is like night and day difference between his old stuff and new stuff. It's like 100 times better, in my opinion. I thought it was amazing, but he seems to be on his way to doing some big things. So I can't wait to hear his story. That being said, here it is, an all new artist on call.
Artist on call. Artist on call.
What's going on, man?
How are you doing?
I'm great, man. So what drew you out of Boston to New York?
I think it was a combination of a lot of things. We had touched on this a little bit, but I went to college for business. But I've been making music since I was probably about 12. So for me, I had never really taken it seriously until I got to a certain point in college. And I feel like a lot of musicians hit just this point in time where your sound just kind of develops. And for me, I started picking up a little bit of traction, started doing a little bit of licensing, producing for, a couple shows, stuff like that, some like fun little extra side things. I remember this point freshman year where my sound just had taken a completely different direction and gone into something that actually sounded good. So the more I went through college, the more people were kind of paying attention and the more I was getting confidence in what I was doing. So I was just like, okay, maybe this actually has like a little bit of viability to it. So as I was finishing out college, I was also starting to put a little bit more emphasis into what I was doing musically. And I was like, all right, cool. I got my degree. I didn't do too badly. Good fallback. But I basically didn't want to get to the point where I was 30 and doing something like consulting. So I was like, you know what? Let's just go all in and see what happens. So after I graduated, I think my plan was originally to go to Los Angeles where my brother is. But for some reason, I was just a little bit more drawn to New York. I think it's just a proximity of everything. And eventually, after I saved up some money, pandemic hit, but we signed our lease. And I think for me, New York is just a lot more of just my vibe and aesthetic. And in general, seemed a little bit more feasible for doing like the type of music I'm doing, trying to be an artist. I think I connected with it better sort of from an artistic standpoint of like, hey, you know what? At this point, I was probably 22. And I was like, all right, let's just like kind of throw some at the wall and see what sticks. And now I'm here. I've been in New York for a year. So
that's so dope. And I could totally envy that. Like I had the opportunity, like I had a few friends that moved out to LA and they're like, hey man, this is the scene. Like what you're doing, you got to come out here. And I didn't make that move. And I still wonder, I'm like, what if I did make that move? But you made that move, you made the move to New York. So like, that's totally admirable. I respect that. Now, what do you like about both cities? Like what's one thing about Boston that you like that you remember, and like what's one thing about New York that kind of stands out to you?
I think I'm trying to make sure. I feel like there are a lot more similarities between the two that people think. For me in general, it hasn't really ever hit me that I'm in New York because I spent a lot of time around here anyway, having family that was close by. I refer to, and I know I'm going to get for this from like a ton of people, but I refer to New York as bigger Boston because in a way it doesn't really feel like I left. Boston in particular has a very, very great sense of community. I feel like everybody there in some capacity like probably knows each other. City of 500,000 people, not super realistic.
AKA they're a lot nicer than New Yorkers.
Yeah. It's sort of like one of the things that hit me the most about the transition between New York and Boston is I consider myself a pretty outgoing person. But in Boston, if you like, I think of this very specific example where if you like drop some in the line at the grocery store, you can like joke around it with people and they're like, oh, that sucks. And you're like, yeah. And New York, you try and do that and they look at you like you've got 6 heads and you're just like trying to just like make some small talk and like nobody wants that. Boston is very community based. We touched on this a little bit too. Very historic city, a great culture. Massachusetts culture I feel like is like nothing else. But then on the same side of things, like so is New York. So New York I think feels a lot more open and a little bit less limiting. I think Boston's a great city to grow in, but after a certain point, I know myself and a lot of other people have felt like, going to the New Yorks, the LAs, there are only two, going to New York or LA,
right,
is sort of like the next step. So when you want to take things further, these are sort of like the places you go in. So New York is a little bit of a harder town, but in general, I think the ambiance is right and it gives you enough to sort of drive just what you want to do, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. And I mean, obviously Boston has the music scene it has as well, but I feel like, no offense to Boston, but like New York's is more competitive, and that's kind of a known thing, it's more, cutthroat, but that makes it all the more better when you do well in New York. It's like, okay, then you could pretty much perform anywhere. But like growing up in Boston, like what, and that's where you grew up, right?
Yeah, for the most part. I was born in Massachusetts. I spent about half of my childhood in Atlanta.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, my dad worked down there. We eventually ended up moving there. And at some point, just we kind of ended up staying because the internet bubble burst, and my dad's a big tech guy, so we were kind of sequestered in Georgia for a while. And then at some point, my parents were like, "You know what? We miss home. Let's go back."
Right.
So from like 10 or 11 onwards, I was in Massachusetts up until last year.
When did the music kick in for you?
So I think the specific time frame that I started making stuff was in, I want to say 6th grade. So I had taken piano lessons when I was a kid. I think I was like 3 or 4, on and off, but I never really connected with it. I guess apparently I was good. It did not stick. So people were like, "Oh yeah, he's got great potential. He should do this forever because he's like so good." Not this case now. For the record, I play 2 instruments aside from being a singer. I play 2 instruments. I play guitar and I play piano, and both are enough in passing that I can like get some on the computer and automate it. So that like childhood prodigy thing did not stick whatsoever. My parents didn't push it, which I think was nice because if they did sort of force it, I don't think I would have kind of made the steps that I have now. Basically, in 6th grade, I had a music production class, and for some reason, I just kind of really gravitated towards it and fell in love. This was sort of like when MacBooks started becoming a thing. My dad got this MacBook Pro from work. There was GarageBand on it. I was experimenting with that at home. And if that was like 2008, maybe, now we're 13 years down the line, and eventually, I went from GarageBand to like Logic 9, started getting more serious into it, and just became like such a big hobby of mine that I spent most of my time at home just working on that stuff. And eventually, just as I started working more towards things, I was writing lyrics, and I was bringing in people from like Reddit to sing stuff. People didn't really sing things the way I wanted to, like the right emotion. I've worked with a lot of great singers for the record, and those releases that are like on Spotify, those are like the best of the best. Eventually, at some point, I just kind of wanted to start doing it myself. That's what brought me into being just like a fully fledged like producer, songwriter, singer.
I mean, similar story to mine. I started out with production and more DJing, but same type of thing on that side of it. And then lyrics came. That's impressive. How did you come up with the name Hal Fun?
I always love the origin story of this because I always try and skirt around it. But the very like straightforward answer was it was sort of like a gamer tag that I had developed, and just this like, I was playing a lot of RPG, Skyrim type, whatever role-playing game things as a kid because I was also super into a lot of that stuff. And I was trying to combine sort of like fantasy words and like elemental whatever. So I took the word Maelstrom and Hailstorm and somehow blended it into what it is. And that's like the straight up answer as to how it existed. I just sort of smashed it together. And that's how people came to know me online. So people that I was friends with, I used to game with and share my music with, all that stuff like that. That's how they knew me. And when we still talk to each other, we still refer to each other. Like we know each other's like real life names, but we all call each other what our gamer tag names were. So it was just something unique to me. It kind of worked. And at this point it's just like too far along the lines to change anything anyway. So we just have it trademarked doing its thing. And it's become sort of like my personal brand.
That's sick. I mean, and look at how far it's come too. I mean, now your stuff is on TV, your music, and it's around you work with different big brands that we'll get into, but like, the biggest thing is like, what did that feel like the first time you heard it on like TV or something, or you heard you were getting the opportunity? What was your reaction? Were you shocked, or were you more like,
honestly,
excited?
Well, it started off pretty mellow. I knew some people who worked in video production companies when I was in college. So they had licensed my stuff out, made a couple $100 easy. They're just like, "Hey, we want to use your song. This is what they usually pay." I was like 6. I was like sick. Was not 6. That would be back to the childhood prodigy thing, man. It's just always been there. I was just like, okay, this is cool. Sure, use it. And then like, I'll just take that cash because I just like waited tables, and I was like, this is a cool little chunk of change. I became more familiar with sync licensing and worked with some really cool agencies, which just kind of started pushing stuff. Pretty standard sync things, just like random brands. For me, it didn't really hit until I had reached a point when I was probably like a sophomore in college. I think I had this idea in mind of just becoming my own licensing company because I had built up this library of several hundred tracks. And I was like, you know what? I'll just do this myself. Like whatever, take the 100%. It did not work. I don't have the drive to do that. It like burned me out to the point where I think I was about to go into junior year of college. And I remember having like gone over in this just in my head a ton of times. And I was like, okay, I don't think I want to do this anymore. Not even just like licensing, just like music in general. I was like, I think I'm going to quit. Fully was almost done with it. Was ready to wash my hands of it. And I went to talk to my mom about like, hey, I think I just want to put this to the side. I don't think it's going anywhere. And literally during that conversation, I got an email from one of my agents, and they had placed my song "The People I Love" in my first feature film.
Oh wow!
And I was like, I'm getting the chills right now because I remember that.
Yeah.
I was like, holy, I'm not a super religious person, but I believe that there's a way to the universe. And I took that very much as a sign that was like
everything happens for a reason.
Everything happens for a reason. So that film was called Gringo. It was premiering in Los Angeles in March of, I think, 2018. Keep in mind, I was going to go out to LA anyway, but my brother lives out there. I went out to see him, and we went to go see the movie, not to the premiere, but we went to go see the movie premiere. And the craziest thing is being in this packed theater. It's like 2/3 of the way through the movie. Obviously, like he and I know why we're there. But I hear the song that I had written in a movie theater with like a couple hundred people.
That's my song.
I'm like, hey, I just want to like stop everybody for a second. You're like like waving to the guy with the camera and just like, hold up. This is me.
Hit pause.
Everybody just take out your phones real fast. Craziest thing is nobody knows that you're in it.
Right.
Everybody's just listening to this scene, the dialogue, whatever. And I'm just hearing the song that was my first like true single just playing in the movie theater. And I was like, this is crazy.
Did you at least like try to sign some autographs on the way out? Like...
I got like 1 or 2. I tried to, my goal was 5, but I came up a little bit short.
Yeah, it was like 2.5. I mean, yeah.
I got halfway there, and then my brother just grabs me by the arm. He's like, I'm not staying around for this, man.
That's amazing though. Like I couldn't imagine being in a theater and like hearing that. That's insane. Especially like you said, around a time where you're thinking about quitting, and then that ends up being the song to pull you right back in it, and you're watching the movie. Like that's nuts.
Yeah, and it's always weird how that happens too. And now I've been doing this. It's kind of I don't know. I don't know if you get like this too, because you've been DJing for what, like 20 years. You've been producing music for probably, I'd imagine, like a similar amount of time. Do you ever reach the point where you feel like you're just like not fazed by your achievements? You're like,
oh, I hate everything I do.
Exactly.
Like I'm not like, I'll never say, like I'll say the people I met, like only because I'm proud to have met them and stuff like that. Like I'll talk about that, but like anything I've done, or if I got an award, like forget it. Like if it's more like the other people that helped me get that, that's what I'm trying to talk about. Like there's no, like I always say it on this podcast, I hate everything I've released so far. It's the stuff I'm working on now that I'm like, no, you got to hear this.
Like this is the, and then a week later you're like, that we're done with that.
Like I'm proud of it right now. I don't know what I'm gonna feel in a week from now,
dude. That's so April, man.
Yeah, seriously. Like like April was 2 weeks ago, dude. I know, but that's what I mean. Like
it's all in the past.
It's all in the past. And that is funny that you say that, because that it seems like it does switch that quick.
It does. Totally. And like down the line, I ended up it got to the point where I was doing stuff on TV. And for me, I know it probably sounds to other people, they're always like, oh, that's cool. To me, it doesn't faze me. And I don't mean to say that I'm not grateful for it either, but I would have stuff. I did a bunch of like primetime stuff on ABC, produced a lot of music for Bravo's Below Deck. That's like the reality TV show with some like chartered yachts. Very interesting. I didn't even like watching reality TV, but it's just like such a kick to see that stuff.
Especially with your music behind it.
Yeah, it's really weird. So I still see that, and I'm like, okay, cool. And then everybody's like, oh, and I'm like, yeah, that's fine. I was like, but come to my show next week, and you'll have like a real good time watching that.
That's a good front. Like, why not? That's a way better pitch than I have. Like,
if you think that's good, you'll really love this.
Yeah. That's so dope. Well, how did the whole pandemic affect you? Like, obviously you're pretty successful with the licensing thing. Did the pandemic affect you at all outside of like performances?
Yeah, the pandemic basically slowed everything.
Right.
Because I had gotten into a groove where, still have my day job, but these things definitely add up, where you're trying to give yourself as much sort of credibility as you can. So when you're producing 10 to 15 songs for a television show, like per season, and all of a sudden nobody's editing, and just literally the last thing, the month before the pandemic happened, I played my last show in Boston. Last show, as if I played any other shows. I played my first show in Boston, and I had written music for the season of Below Deck that was coming out, and then everything just stopped. And that was really, and I'm sure you feel this too. It's just like everything that we do for those of us in entertainment, a lot of our lifestyles and just careers came to a pause. So for me, everything that I had, like my sources of income, everything had just sort of just shifted. And I was like, great, what do I do with my time? I have like no purpose now.
Right. Well, and it's like, how are you going to monetize? And that was the thing for me, is like, that's where the label kind of stood out, because I was like, okay, now I can plan ahead, way ahead, because look at how much time we had. Yep. And then, but like the thing that I noticed that I didn't know was going to happen was that my anxiety was building up, and I didn't realize it. But then when it came back time to go back out and DJ, like, I was like, wait, what? Like,
I have to do this.
Yeah. I was like, I got to deal with that pressure. Like, and that's like hitting, like, that's where I'm at now. I'm like, wow, like, that's kind of a crazy concept that I never really thought I'd encounter, or crazy, obstacle, I guess you could say, but like, it is kind of cool though, in a way that for a lot of musicians, I'm hearing it was productive in a way, because they got to write, they got to work on their craft without even intending to, because you didn't really know how long it was going to go on for, you just kept writing,
100%. And for me, the one saving grace of the pandemic, I think a lot of people had the really things happen to them, just in general, whether people who had lost loved ones, stuff like that. For me, on a lighter note, I was one of the people that was like, we have all the time in the world, let's just put all of our energy into social media. And through that, when we were all super gung-ho and trying to get followers and and proving that our lives are interesting, even when we're stuck in the same house for 4 months, I ended up connecting with some really great people, one of which is a wonderful gentleman named AJ Paulette, who's actually now my vocal producer, co-producer, and engineer here in New York.
Wow.
And that was like the saving grace of the pandemic. Is he and I were literally in the studio yesterday, and everything that I've released this year, including what we're working on, EP coming out, album, all of these I've worked on with AJ. Which is like the next kick that brought what I was doing into like a whole new light. So I had written some stuff, only one track from the pandemic, or at least the lockdown, made its way into the project coming up. And that's the song Stranded, which is already out. But that's the first thing that he and I had connected over, because he was like, oh, I really like this. Do you want to work on it together? And I was like, yeah.
Right.
What do I have to lose?
Yeah. And now I did notice like a big grow, like, not, don't take this the wrong way either.
I promise you I won't. Yeah. If you say, you sound shittier than you did before, and be like, oh, everything I'm doing is just, it's all been a lie.
There was this, I listened to a lot of your old stuff prior to this episode, and I was listening to it, and then I compared it to the new EP that just came out, In Transit. And I was like, wow, there was like a lot of growth in between there, like,
thanks, man.
And like what it was like, what I mean by that is like, I liked a lot of the songs. I'm trying to think of specifically, as I'm saying that, I'm trying to think of the songs I listened to, but I liked them a lot. There was one thing or a few things about each song I liked individually. And then like when I listened to In Transit, I was like, whoa, I was like, is this the same artist? I was like, it's totally like, it was like totally like evolved, and you could see like growth is the best word. Like,
yes.
What do you think it was in between, your first recording and this one?
I think one of the big factors in this was 100% working with AJ, because seriously, I'm just like so eternally grateful to just have him give me his time. We spent a lot of time working on everything. One of the things that I had mentioned too was just that point freshman year of college where my sound kind of took a turn for the better. And then 4 years down the line, going in from like senior year into like that, it's not actually a gap year, but the gap between my graduation and moving to New York, and which is basically just like post-grad, like first half of the pandemic together, my sound had hit another point where I was just really leaning into the experimental thing and just really trusting my ear. I think a lot of times I'd use references and being like, oh, I'm going to like produce like this or produce like that. I just sort of trusted the techniques that I had learned over time and just kind of let run haywire. So it was basically like coming through to New York and actually being able to work in a proper studio really helped me focus. I'm trying to think, I don't want to say focus my power because that sounds weird.
It's a superhero.
I know, seriously, right?
Focus your strength.
Actually focus my strength specifically into just like applying A, formulas, B, just fucking around with it, and C, just giving myself more confidence to just trust myself and work with it. I don't even know if that alphabetical list makes sense. It's basically just like sort of like a prism. I think of, oh my God, I don't even want to say the wrong. I feel like I'm going to get destroyed for this. Is it AC/DC? No. There's an album cover, super famous album cover. I look like such a fake right now, but it's the glass prism with the rainbow coming out of it.
Oh, Pink Floyd.
It's Pink Floyd. I knew it was Pink Floyd. In my head, I'm like, is it Pink Floyd? Nobody kill me, please. I'm just getting into classic rock now. It's sort of like that. So it's taking all those inputs and then turning it into that fucking rainbow, which is where working with AJ and being in the studio has focused sort of everything. So it's like, okay, cool. We know this works. We have these references. These are the artists that we like. This is all the that I'm doing that has just like become the way that I sing stuff, the way that I layer stuff, like stylistically. The studio for me was the way that I was able to finally channel everything I wanted to do with the extra help of working with somebody who's been an engineer as long as I've been a producer. So it's been really solid to be able to see that come around. And I'm glad, I appreciate it too, by the way, A, listening, and B, just noticing the growth, because I think that's all artists ever want to hope for. You don't want to stay the same person forever. That's boring.
Right. Well, and it never, I guess the better way to put it too is it never stands out to me as much as yours did. Like as soon as I was listening, I was like, it's total transformation in like the best way possible. Now, speaking of which, tell me a little bit about your new EP called In Transit. Like what sparked the idea for it and the motivation behind it?
I guess sort of the best place to start is the title, because I'm a very title-based person. I literally have a notes app with just song titles and shit like that. And In Transit was just one of the song titles that had popped up to me, because I think being on a post-grad kick and like a hey, I'm in New York, whatever, or hey, I'm not doing this. This isn't like what sustains me yet. I think In Transit itself is a title talking about just where I'm at, being like, I know I'm onto something, but I'm not quite there yet. There are 4 songs on the EP, 3 of which have already come out. We're just sort of doing the bundling thing, which is pretty industry standard, but each of the songs is pretty solidly special. Stranded, since we've already talked about Stranded, I feel like Stranded is worth mentioning. That's just that was the pandemic song that was sort of like, we're all in this together. Things suck, but like we got a light at the end of the tunnel situation. Folktronic, very much inspired by Avicii, who was one of my early influences. That was sort of like the capstone first thing that AJ and I had worked on. It's just we ended up having to rework it a lot to get it to where it wanted to be. Then there's the song Picture Perfect, which is about the town that I grew up in, featuring a great rising hip-hop artist, emo rap, as we like to call it, Paris Hart. He's awesome. He came and dropped some verses on it and became sort of like a societal narrative of just sort of like the limbo state that everything's been at. There's Cold Carolina, which was the first single that AJ and I had released together, very much inspired by artists like Chelsea Cutler, so a little bit more of like the electropop dance pop vibe, acoustic influence, throwing in a bunch of and like a big, really emotional track about a breakup. And then there's Stretch My Legs, which is the sort of like the capstone of the EP, which is coming out brand new for everybody again on the 27th. And that's with my friend Annie Moffat, who I grew up with in town, but we had become really close friends in New York because we both lived here. So that particular song is just about a day, us being, 2 artists just like on the hunt, trying to make it happen. A lot of times you can feel burned out. So there was one point where we're like, let's not try writing today. Let's just go out and just do some. So we ended up just going to get ramen, walked over the Williamsburg Bridge, spent some time in Brooklyn, and we basically went back, wrote Stretch My Legs like a couple weeks later off of an instrumental that I had like half baked. And super untraditional song. The structure isn't even really a structure. It's like 2 halves. And that's just our narrative about being artists in New York, finally feeling optimistic about some stuff. So there's no central theme, but it's just sort of like, hey, this is where I started, this is where I'm going, this is the middle ground of what's what right now.
But even in the recording, like listening to, I'm just guessing the way it was recorded based on my experience, but like you could hear the chemistry you two had on that song. Yeah. Like the fact that you were recording on point with each other. It didn't even sound like vocal line or anything was input. It just sounded like you guys were on point just together on that. And it was so impressive. Like that was debatable for me to play that one on this episode because like I had to pick a song. Like if you guys go right now and check out on any digital streaming platform, you can find In Transit by Haelphon. That's Haelphon. You can listen to this whole EP. It's only 4 songs, so you're not going to be, sitting
it's like
there
10 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. You could take the time, and you're not going to regret it because I listened to it, and it was hard for me to decide which songs I wanted to play. Which it's usually like, oh, okay, that one or that one. Maybe I have it down to 2. Like this one, like I was all for. I was like, which one do I play? Do I have to like play the one that has the hip hop artist on it, But really, it came down for me. I was like Cold Carolina. I was like, it hit me a certain way. I was like, that's the one I'm gonna play. So. Right now, I'm going to show you guys Cold Carolina off of In Transit by Haelphon. Check it out on every major digital streaming platform. In Transit, Cold Carolina. Here it is, and then we're going to get right back into it with Haelphon.
Just to keep it all in check. It's hard to get to moving on with all the things we said when we were something. Damn, we were something. If misery breeds company, then why do you seem glad to be rid of me? I'm wondering, could I have been that bad? Yet I still miss you. Split it
was Cold Carolina by Haelphon. You can find that on any major digital streaming platform right now off of his EP called In Transit. You can spell his name Haelphon. Crazy, dude. That song is so dope.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You know, like I have to, when it comes down to these songs, I always try to come up with comps and like who does it sound like? Who's it sound like? When I was listening to that, there was so many, but like they go away quickly. But the last three that I held on to were like Mumford and Sons mixed with like Hozier, mixed with like Need to Breathe almost. It's like those three are like the last three I thought of. I was like, damn, it's like it's such a blend and they're all freaking like huge favorites, you know, like that's awesome. Like totally stuck out to me. Congrats on that EP, dude. The whole thing sounds dope.
Thank you so much. And that's also it's a solid trifecta. So, I mean, even Hozier alone, oh my God, what a voice. Like I literally use songs like Take Me to Church, stuff like that to train with. So I appreciate that.
Ironic. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, dude, it stuck out to me. And like, how'd you come up with the cover art? Did you draw that or did somebody you know do that?
So I geek out over the cover art thing. I've done this a couple times now. This is twice. This has been twice. I released a song called The Author back, I want to say in May of the pandemic. And at that point, there was just no way to shoot content. And I was like, you know what? I've had people do for me before. Let me get somebody to just sort of, a friend of mine, actually, Brenna Lopes, did that on commission for The Author. And I decided I kind of wanted to make that a theme for at least like the important releases, but not like the title. The albums and stuff like that already have covers shot. But I was like, who do I know? And I was like, you know what? My friend Claire Schneider, she's wicked good. And we had talked about doing a cover for a while. And I decided at this point in particular, I was like, I don't feel like shooting the content anyway. I was like, you know what? Let me just commission her out to do this because we had talked about it. And we had the album sort of concept. We had decided to work on something previously, a song that's now not going to get released on the album, but we had a lot of mood boards on Pinterest. Actually, that's kind of how we get there. So we had a bunch of references that we already liked, and we had talked about the subway thing for some reason because it's like so New York, man. But basically, I was like, hey, I was thinking of this. Like, I want some rendition of me on it. Kind of take it, just take it where you want. She comes back with this idea, was awesome. It was basically the version of it that now exists as a cover, and then we just sort of changed the colors a little bit, so like this warmer light around me and then cooler light around me, kind of just being it's sort of metaphoric to the fact that, you know, I'm in New York doing my thing. Nobody really knows me as a musician yet, so I'm just like kind of there in my bubble, just on public transit doing my thing. And she absolutely crushed it. So I'm super excited for people to see the artwork coming out because I just get pride in working with other artists, even if they're not musicians.
Right.
It's just kind of a fun thing to do when you really just build a full art form out, and the cover is equally as important as the release, I'd say, too.
Well, and that's a good and bad thing about New York anyways, because you could be, you know, freaking Madonna on the subway, but New Yorkers don't give a
Nah, they're like, who's that?
Yeah, like, oh, what a has-been, you know?
It's like the half look, like the side of it, you're like, oh yeah, I'm like, Madonna's over there, cool.
Yeah, cool.
And
anyway,
like
back to my freaking Facebook, you know, it's like
rat runs past you, you're like, oh yeah, cool. You're more surprised by the rat than you are by Madonna.
Yeah, like, wait, that was awesome. Like,
yeah.
No, that's amazing. And I feel like what better time to come out with an EP titled In Transit, like right now, you know, it's like perfect, especially for New York, you know,
yeah.
Like New York right now is kind of in shambles in a way, you know, like I've heard some stories that like the old neighborhoods I used to hang out in and stuff that are like, don't go there anymore. And I'm like, what? Like I was walking down the street at midnight, you know, or like 3 a.m. Like it's crazy how it's turned out to be the way it is now. Have you experienced anything like that?
I think for me, it's kind of, I spent a lot of time around New York City growing up, especially as I was more in college, because again, I have family here. So I'd spend like Black Fridays in New York City and we just come down during the summer. The tune is a little bit different. I think that New York very much has its life left in it. It's been through a lot of stuff between the pandemic, 9/11, just like all sorts of economic crises. It gets hit hard. And I think every time, God, this sounds so cheesy, but I think it bounces back stronger every time. It is sad to see a lot of local businesses, restaurants, stuff like that, just gone. Honestly, one of my side hustles is doing social media for a business that was built out of. It's a mozzarella stick company called Big Stick Willie's.
Oh wow!
one of my side gigs is doing that. Their social media, and what the founder Will Reynolds did. He lived in the East Village, and he saw all the restaurants around him just closed down. So he started hiring people from New York that were laid off during the pandemic. So I think one of the things about the situations is, especially regarding arts and just like small business and stuff like that, when a lot of old stuff clears out, it's pretty tragic, but there's always room for an influx of new things.
Right.
It's like a reset button. And I think what we're going to see too is just like a major arts boom in New York once we're finally out of the I think it's going to be Roaring 20s 2.0.
Well, because you're going to see a whole new sense of appreciation, you know, for the things that you didn't really appreciate before, most likely. You know, because it's like you take it for granted, you know, the Metropolitan and all that stuff. It's like everything's there that, I mean, I've walked past it a million times. Have I gone in it? Probably not in years. You know, it's like, but it makes you wonder, you know, you're probably onto something there. Now, prior to this project, did you pretty much produce everything yourself? I mean, obviously you worked on the production on this one, I'm sure, but like everything was solely your production before this one, right?
Yeah. So before the 4 songs on In Transit, it was me just solo. So producing all the instrumentals, writing everything, recording everything legit on the microphone that we're talking with.
Wow.
I know, right? It's like right here. This is the star, is this road.
And if you're watching this on YouTube, you get to experience a milestone here.
YouTube people, you see the mic. This is the mic. This is now the demo mic.
Oh, that's sick.
It's good too for the artists that are listening, that if you're looking to get into stuff, Rode NT1A, man, it's the.
And this is totally unbiased, unsponsored. He's recommending.
Unsponsored, I swear to God. I got it for like half off, and the best investment I ever made. Yeah, I did pretty much everything myself at that point. Looping in AJ, I do a lot of the production. I basically build the tracks. The way I like to describe it is I build the tracks, I write and then whenever I get stuck, he and I sit down in a room, we start working on the lyrics again. That's what we did yesterday. We were in the studio. Not every day is sunshine and rainbows. You know this too, being a musician. Right. It's just like you're not always going to be on it.
No.
I wasn't really getting a lot of done vocally, and he and I sat down and wrote this killer verse that wouldn't have flowed the way it did if I didn't have him with me. So the best sort of relationship. He's my co-producer. He's my vocal engineer. He takes everything that I give him. He makes it sound good. That's how I like to describe it.
Well, and you're lucky. You're lucky that you were able to adapt that quickly, or know, bounce back that quickly. Because like for me, I remember so many nights I'd be in the studio with other artists or even myself and whatever project, and they'd be like, writer's block or a cold nasally nose, something like that, and we'd be like, we have to figure something out, we have to do that, like, and they'd run across the street to a bodega, get a tea or honey tea, something like that. And then I specifically remember one session that I was actually deaf in my right ear because I was so congested, and I had to get this verse done that night. It was a while back, couldn't even tell you the song. And actually, I don't even think that song released now that I think about it. But
so it wasn't even worth it, man.
Yeah, no, seriously, it wasn't. But this is how like we were like, and this was probably 3 a.m, and it was the best take of that verse I ever did. And I was so congested in one ear, but you would never know. But it's like that type of stuff. We were just battling all night. And then if all else fails, we would just head to the club or something and go out. But it's just like, but it's different. Like I guess that kind of shows, like a positive remark on like your chemistry with AJ, the fact that you guys were able to just snap back and get right into it without having to go get some, tea or, cookies or something, like
I'm not going to lie to you. We did take a Cheez-It break. We went he went to the bodega while I'm sitting there scratching my head about writing this. Yeah. Went down to the bodega. He was like, you want anything? And I was like, yeah, man, I just want Cheez-Its. So he comes back with these 2 mini bags. He's like, you know what? I haven't had Cheez-Its in years. He comes back with 2 of those and then this bag of macadamia nut cookies, which I'm allergic to. So like whatever. He housed that. I had my Cheez-Its, and then, we wrote a killer second verse.
So if you want to write an EP like In Transit, the best recommendation is Cheez-Its.
Yes, 100% Cheez-Its. No, this is not sponsored either. I feel like Rode and Cheez-Its are going to be like, hey, if they want to come to my door and give me free mics and free snacks, like, I'm here for it.
That's such an odd combo. It's almost like I should name the episode Cheez-Its and Rode.
Cheez-Its and mics. That's all you need to survive as a musician, is just cheesy snack foods and good quality microphones.
Who were some of your earlier on inspirations, getting into music?
You know, I feel like it's a great question too, because I feel like you'll appreciate this dually being somebody who's also into hip hop and EDM. For me, I had started really getting into the production of electronic music because honestly, I couldn't tell you what specifically I do now. I just kind of go for it. Definitely part of the progressive house era where, it's Swedish House Mafia, it's Deadmau5, it's Cascade, Avicii, big one. I think that was sort of like the lasting one. And then as time has progressed, I started focusing more on people like Mike Stud and Post Malone. And the biggest one of all, which has evolved over the past couple of years, was Mac Miller.
Oh, yeah.
Massively a Mac fan. I always feel about that because I got way more into his stuff after he passed away.
Mm-hmm.
But I always find this like weird, bittersweet just feeling in the fact that my two biggest influences are Avicii and Mac, and they're both artists that have passed at this point, tragically. But those are the two that I kind of just build everything off of. If I were to
great talent. I mean,
oh my God,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Well, when you talk about evolution too, one of the reasons why it means so much to me that you can recognize the difference is I firmly believe, and maybe you can attest this too, being a big hip hop guy, Mac Miller as an artist, I think had one of the best career progressions of anybody I think I've ever heard.
I mean, just listen to his latest, like his most recent before he passed, the Spotify sessions. I mean, he was singing and playing the piano. It's like, dude, who is this guy?
Yeah.
That was not him in the begging.
Yeah, it's just amazing to see that sort of stuff develop. And I take a lot of influences from him and from Avicii. And there's like, I the best way to describe the sound is like Calvin Harris meets Mac Miller.
Yeah.
But trying to just practice and build sounds like them has just fueled everything into me doing my own thing, but using all these production tricks that I've learned. It's always like a constant process. And I'm sure like for you, I've pushed the same question back on you. I know for when I listen to your music, especially things like Closed Doors, I hear a lot of like Beastie Boys, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Who would you say are your biggest influences?
Beastie Boys, number one, and then Mike Shinoda from Linkin Park, Fort Minor, he jumped out. Really, it started with Beastie Boy. I think my first album was DMX that I've ever had hip hop wise.
Rest in peace, another one.
Yeah, right. But like, and that was, I'm sure that had something to do. But for me, really, like growing up, Beastie Boys DJing was Mixmaster Mike. The Executioners, Rob Swift, who I've had on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Like those were like the biggest influences. But definitely for that song, I really dug into controversy. I was listening to like Mike D from the Beastie Boys. His energy is what, I echo now, with the new tone I have, so like that's dead on, Beastie Boys all the way.
Nice. And I'm just out of curiosity too, just for general wonderings, who do you find yourself listening to these days?
These days it's tough in hip hop, like these days, like I'm always talking about that on here. And like
I've closed again, this goes back to Closed Doors.
Yeah.
I sensed a lot of that in the lyrics.
Oh yeah.
Too.
Oh yeah. And it's like, I feel like Kendrick Lamar is obviously the go-to because he's relevant still today and people are still waiting on his album.
Mm-hmm.
The best album I heard lately though was J. Cole.
Yeah.
Like that was insane what he did with that because it was authentic. It was, right from the heart. And he wasn't, you could tell, I mean, maybe he was, but from a listener or consumer standpoint, I didn't sense any, he wasn't trying to commercialize it at all. He was trying to just let it out, and let write what was on his mind.
Yeah.
Nas's new one, even. I thought,
oh my God, yes.
And I thought when he was going to come out with that, I thought it was going to be like, this is old Nas. I'm not going to check it out, like whatever. I put it on and I was like, yeah, that song was good. Listen to the next one. Oh, wow, that one's good too. I went right through the whole freaking thing and I was like, this dude still got it. I was like, he doesn't even need to rap. It's like Eminem. It's like, why the heck is he still rapping? It's like,
I feel like it's just really cool to see. I think it's a rarity to have projects that you can listen to in entirety.
Yeah.
Because I feel like so many things are like, all right, if you have a 12-track album, you're like, we got 6 hits on here and then 6 sort of like fillers and like maybe I'm like half in it, maybe I'm not. I feel like that's also like my primary goal too, is to just have something that people can listen to, like just through to.
Right.
That's so important.
Well, and the thing that you did too, that you nailed it with In Transit, is people's attention span nowadays. Like it is hard for me to listen to a 10-track album unless it's very good. I mean, if I'm driving like I am most days, then yeah, I'll listen to whatever you put on. But like But most days, if I'm in the studio and I want to listen to something in the background just to, get my ears warmed up or something like that, I'm not listening to a 10-track album.
Yeah.
It's going to be like a 4-track EP or something. So I feel like you nailed it with that, because people's attention span is like TikTok, 5 seconds. If that video doesn't fucking hit you, then
you've got like a millisecond to catch their attention.
Dude.
If not, well, try again next year, man.
Out of nowhere, like listeners and fans have so much like superior like power against musicians. They're like, nope. You didn't catch me in the first 2 seconds. It's like, you dude.
I know, you're like, come on, man. You got to get to like the bridge. The bridge is really where it's at here.
It's like, come on, man. This is art. I'm not trying to please you in the fucking intro.
A lot of stuff too. One of the things that what I was personally struggling with is like, I'm coming from the era where just EDM tracks in particular, because I'm not making EDM per se. I'm like really not. It's electronic, but
it has its elements though.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, totally. Yeah. But I'm also coming from that era again. Like I think of Swedish House Mafia in particular, where their songs are like 5-6 minutes. And then I'm producing that's like 1:45 or like 2:43. And I'm like, am I too short on this?
Well, I think it all depends on where you want to play it too.
Exactly. A great point too. And then I kind of realized that for me, rather than worrying about the time length in particular, it was about, hey, does this sound good and does it sound complete? If not, what can we do to tweak it? Otherwise, it's just like you're going to get an intro, a verse, a bridge, verse 2, whatever, chorus, boom, done. 2 minutes and 53 seconds.
No, and that's the thing. And a lot of house and techno throws me off for that reason. I'm like, oh wait, I thought it should have ended there. And it's still
16-bar outro.
Yeah, it's like
16-bar intro.
It's crazy. I'm like,
damn, on the floor.
It's still going. And I think part of one thing I struggled with was I hated hip hop for a while. When it first started going to mumble rap, I was like, I can't do this. I was like, there's no way I'm not going to try to compete with these guys, because one, somehow they're getting to be huge. And there's no competition because we don't sound alike at all, and like, so for me, that's when I ventured into EDM and like put out songs like Number One, which was definitely inspired like by production wise by Avicii. I did that. I got into the format of EDM and then I transitioned back to hip hop, and like naturally I carried that format with me. Yeah. And like when I was writing songs, I was like, no, wait, this isn't a hip hop format. You got to like get the freaking EDM format out of your head,
I feel like it's like a weird middle ground too, because one of the things that we talk a lot about in the studio is just song structure, and a lot of times I'll do like the same. It'll be like verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, things like that. But I also am just at this point where I don't really care about the structure. I just like the elements, and I want to just have stuff. Somebody that I used to work with described this as a great thing, which I found a lot of sort of solace in, is making your tracks kind of like a roller coaster, which is unexpected, even if it's just like how it sounds, whatever. But what you're doing too is just like bridging these gaps between genres, and I know that you take a lot of pride in doing that, particularly as do I, is being able to just fuse all this together to have whatever the hell it is some pretty unique stuff, because everybody's going to do it differently. At the end of the day, it sounds fresh and it sounds great.
No, and it is, and it's a lot of fun. And like, speaking of which, like, which genre do you have most fun experimenting with?
Honestly, it's my genres are so unclear to me.
Well, there's so many subgenres now. Anyway,
I know. It's like I can't tell you what the difference is between dance pop and electropop.
I don't even know what the hell either one is.
Yeah, like I know that electropop is like described as Charlie XCX, which checks out. So I think I'm kind of in that realm a lot of the time.
Yeah. For me, I'm so narrow-minded. I'm like, she's like EDM mixed with pop. Like,
yeah, but electronic dance music.
Yeah, I guess it works out. But when someone says like pop and dance, that's two different. When they say it's dance pop, I'm like, oh, I thought those were two different genres.
Yeah. It's always the hyphens. The hyphens are just like the bridge between universes. I guess and I'm going to say alt pop. Like, what is alt pop? Alternative pop.
Right. Yeah.
I feel like that's probably where I get the most sort of experimental with, and I think Cold Carolina is the best example of that. Again, an artist, Chelsea Cutler. I think she's great. She's also, I believe she's originally from Connecticut too, but she does a lot of stuff that like starts off with acoustic or uses like a lot of live instruments and then blends it into some more electronic elements. So I think Cold Carolina, things like Stranded that do that. are the sort of like the most where I'm like, okay, where can I kind of stretch this? The second verse of Cold Carolina gets into this sort of like pop rap part, and a lot of it is just like a lot of big vocal stuff, and I like to do both. I by no means call myself a rapper, because I'm not. I just do like a lot of like semi-toned, like fast-paced verses, and just a lot of like big singing chorus parts.
Well, there's so many different forms of rap anyways. You know, like a lot of people are rapping and they don't even realize they're rapping, you know?
Yeah, I'm not setting out to do it. Just like, no, this is where my voice sounds good and this is how I get across what I'm trying to say.
Right. Yeah, you definitely don't want to be categorized as that. That makes sense. Would you say you found yourself musically already? Or do you feel like you're just kind of coasting and just putting it out and you're like, oh, this is great, whatever, on to the next thing? Or you feel like, no, this is me. This is what I'm doing.
I think that I'm fully in the direction that I need to be, which is an answer that I probably would have told you differently a week ago. We're pretty deep in the throes of finishing up my like first studio album, technically sophomore album, whatever. The first album I released like was a good concept, but I didn't love it. I had rushed it. It was made in my house. Just like a lot of it was just sort of, I just like rushed through a lot of it. Where I'm at now is I've become so centralized around a sound that I think I'm pretty much where I need to be. Last week I had finished recording one of the songs off the album, and In Transit is the first 4 out of the 12.
Oh wow!
So yeah, so
That's cool.
That's just kind of how we're working on everything, because it takes me so long to finish things that I think it's enough that people will latch on and just like what they hear.
So is it like a storyline? So it's like In Transit, and then the next one's going to be To Somewhere, and then
somewhere,
and then the third one's going to be like Over Here, you know, like something like that.
In Transit, I was in New York, now I'm in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Surprise, bitches. It's
that would suck. That would suck if that was actually happening, because I totally blew that if that was true.
Oh no. Just I kind of steer away from central album themes.
Yeah.
The album that includes these tracks are really, really, really solid. I think In Transit is a great sort of appetizer as to what to expect from the other 8. And the other 8 take all the best elements from In Transit, just like the vocal, just the singing parts, the sort of like sing rap parts, and it fuses them together in such a ridiculous way that I think people are going to be really pleasantly surprised with how it's coming out. And I was just like worried about the reception like a week or two ago, because I feel like we all go through this. We're like, are people going to like that I'm doing?
Right. Yeah. Especially today, you know, like, what do you think? What's your take on the music industry today? Like, what do you think about how it's getting run and everything? Do you think, like, for me personally, I feel like artists could be getting a lot more, you know?
Yeah.
Like, especially digitally.
I think we're at the point where there are so many great tools. You don't really see a lot of one-hit wonders these days. One of the things that I've noticed, I think of like The Verve, Bittersweet Symphony back in, I think it came out in like 2007.
Was
like
it really that late? I'm thinking
in 2002.
Maybe. I don't know.
That particular song, first of all, I love. Is aged great.
Oh yeah.
But this is an example of bands that just, you know, you didn't have the access to social media and to the platforms. And I know a lot of growth is still needed in terms of things like artist compensation, but I love seeing, I'm such a Spotify junkie in terms of just like the customization and what you can do.
Yeah.
And being like, this is my artist profile, this is me, this is my bio,
right.
These are the photos that I have, this is the that I'm listening to, my playlists. Like, I love all of that stuff so much. We've been given the tools. It's still very difficult to leverage, but if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. It's like being an influencer. TikTok is shaking up the music industry like crazy. I love TikTok as a consumer, but as a content creator, like, I don't know what to do. You know?
Yeah. No, seriously. Like, I love it because, like, I just name my songs certain things. Like, my one song, No More Snowing in May. Like, now if you look that up on TikTok, the only people that have used that song are like people that are sitting out on their front steps in like May in like Los Angeles, and it's
yes. And you're like, whoa, this is so relevant, dude. How did he know?
And really, like,
psychic.
The song has nothing to do with snow. Like,
the secret psychic arm of Mazement.
Yeah, seriously. So now I'm like, maybe I need to go down like each month and be like, you know, January fun, you know, or
like February vibe.
Yeah,
October, it's almost Halloween, but not quite. It's 2 weeks before. Are you having a party?
December's lit, you know, and then everybody's like going to be TikToking it. It's, hey, marketing strategy.
There you go.
Haelphon, thank you for coming on. If you're looking for Haelphon on social media, you can find him on Facebook.com/Haelphon. That's HAELPHON. You could also find him on Spotify, Instagram, and go to Haelphon.com. Go listen to In Transit on every digital streaming platform where you listen to music. You got to listen to that thing all the way through, even if you check out one song. Actually, you know what? Yeah, check out one song because that's going to make you want to check out the others. So
the waterfall effect.
Exactly. So once again, thanks for coming on, man. And I can't wait to hear more from you soon.
Dude, thank you so much for having me too. This has been fantastic too. It's always a bit of a blessing when you're able to just sit there and talk to somebody for an hour about your music. Two quick shout outs, one to AJ Paulette, my engineer, and to the Buddy Project Studio in Astoria, Queens, Kieran Kelly, the owner as well, for giving me the new tools to make all this possible, because the EP would not be anything without both of them.
Absolutely. Everybody did a killer job. Don't forget, go check out Haelphon. Just like any artist on call, my expectations are totally exceeded to what they were supposed to be or what I thought they were going to be. Amazing artist. Don't forget to go check him out. As promised, we're going to close this out with a release feast.
Release feast.
The first album I want to mention, I did talk about in the Artist on Call a little bit, but Nas's new album called King's Disease 2, released on August 6th. It's his 13th studio album. He released it through Mass Appeal Records, and it serves as the sequel to his King's Disease album that came out a year ago in August 2020. This album features artists like Lauryn Hill, Eminem, EPMD, Charlie Wilson, and a few more. Don't sleep on it, because I didn't expect it to sound as great as it did, but it's available everywhere, as you would expect. I've been trying to listen to as much music as I could throughout the past month, but I haven't, as much as I've wanted to. But the only other release that stuck out to me was Skrillex released Don't Go, featuring Justin Bieber and Don Toliver. I think that's how you pronounce his name. But it was released on August 20th through Ausla and Atlantic Records. Different vibe to what you'd expect from Skrillex. I mean, it's not EDM at all. It's more hip hop and what people are considering pop today. I mean, there's so many subgenres. I don't know what they consider it, but it's on the radio a lot, this genre. And Skrillex produced it. It was impressive. Definitely stuck out to me. Go check it out. Don't Go by Skrillex. But yeah, that was a pretty long episode. I don't want to keep you too much longer. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to check out the Lovesick remix by my new group, Real East Duo, coming out this Friday, September 3rd on SoundCloud. Find it on my socials. Find the video on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel on YouTube as well, as there's clips and different things coming out weekly. You never know when I'm just going to throw something out there for free that you could have just by watching the video. And most importantly, stay tuned for our new single coming out called Something New, releasing everywhere on September 28th. Thank you for your support. And until next episode.